when we draw it, it's way easier than even respiration. So let's go there. So this is really kind of cool. Think about this. Photosynthesis takes air in the form of carbon dioxide. It takes water and it takes sunlight. Air, water, and sunlight, and creates what is needed for people, for animals, for plants, for bugs, for everything to survive, from light and air. Okay, kind of a trip if you think about it. Now these little guys inside here, this is a plant cell, and all these little kind of green dots, those are going to be our chloroplasts. We're going to look at their structure in just a minute. Energy needs for life. All life needs a constant input of energy. We know that comes from the sun. Heterotrophs, animals, get their energy from eating other things. Hetero means other, troph means feeding or eat. So we're eating other things. And we make our energy through cellular respiration. Now, autotrophs are plants. Okay, they produce their own energy, auto meaning self. So these are self-feeding or self-eating, not as in eating yourself, it's more self-feeding. And they do that by converting the energy of sunlight into something usable. They can build organic molecules. Remember, C, H, and O, those are our big ones for our organic molecules, from carbon dioxide. Okay, can you imagine if you just laid out in the sun and breathed, that you would be able to, like, you wouldn't be hungry, you'd be full, you'd be, you know, healthy, all that. Be kind of nice. Now they make energy and synthesize sugar through photosynthesis. So they make their energy and then they store some in the form of sugars. We also call heterotrophs consumers and autotrophs producers. And I want you to check out that we have building organic molecules and breaking down organic molecules. Remember, we talked about how a lot of what we're going to see is one thing builds, one thing's destroyed, one thing makes energy, one thing takes energy, that they're going to be working together. So here is how respiration and photosynthesis are connected. This equation right here, you need to know this, you need to understand this. It looks so simple, but you really need to have a good, deep understanding of what this is. Okay, so we start with what we just studied, respiration. We know that we take in sugar and oxygen, right? We eat and we breathe. So sugar and oxygen. And we need this oxygen as that electron acceptor, so we know we need both of these. And what we wind up getting is carbon dioxide, we breathe that out, water, which is produced in the electron transport chain, and energy that our cells can use. So we put this in, we get this out. Now, if we look at autotrophs, they need carbon dioxide, water, and energy. That's what was on the opposite side for us. And they give off sugar and oxygen. These two cycles work together. Okay, we need one to have the other. Okay, so I need you to think back. We talked about mitochondria. What kind of cells do cellular respiration? Come on, guys. What kind of cells do cellular respiration? Good, eukaryotes, because they have that mitochondria, right? And so far, none of you have said animal. That's good, because all of our cells, if it's a eukaryote, it does respiration. Okay, so that means that if I am looking at a plant, does a plant do respiration? Yes. So plants do this. They have that stored energy. Well, they use that stored energy in respiration. So do plants give off carbon dioxide? Ooh, this is going to ruin all the things you learned in elementary school. Plants give off carbon dioxide. Okay, they do give off carbon dioxide, but here's the thing. When they do photosynthesis, they give off oxygen, and they do way more photosynthesis than they do respiration. So the carbon dioxide they give off is really small compared to the amount of oxygen they give off. Okay. When would plants use respiration? Plants use respiration anytime they can't get sunlight. Okay, so there are a lot of plants that do respiration in the winter because they live in areas where they don't get as much sunlight, so it's not as long, and the sunlight isn't as intense. And the storage form, we call that starch. Remember, we talked about things like carrots and potatoes and how that's storing the energy for the plant for later. So they can actually pull those sugars out of those storage areas like the carrot, the potato, the onion, and use that for later. Okay. So all eukaryotic cells do this part. It's not just heterotrophs. So one thing I don't like about this slide. And then autotrophs do this, and only autotrophs can do this. We can't. I would not need to diet if I could just go lay out in the sun and just avoid going grocery shopping. So here we are converting, okay, our carbons here. And here we're converting them back. The top one is an exergonic. We're giving off energy. That's our ATP there. This is endergonic. We're trapping energy. Okay, are you guys starting to see how we had to do units 1 and 2 so that you could fully understand as we keep going? So we talked about endergonic. Actually, that was at the beginning of this unit, endergonic and exergonic, and how if we have one that's energy releasing, we'll have one that's energy consuming. And so here we have respiration and photosynthesis and working back and forth with each other. And the derpy penguin. Okay, what does it mean to be a plant? You collect light energy and transform it into chemical energy. So we talked about the laws of thermodynamics. We can't like create or destroy energy, we're just changing it. So we change it from light, sunlight, into chemical energy. Okay, and then we can store that as a sugar that the plant uses or stores. And then from the environment, plants also pick up some of the building blocks they need, like carbon dioxide and water, but they also need some things like potassium and phosphorus and nitrogen, magnesium, a few other little things like that. And they use those to create all the other things besides the sugars. So in order to understand how a plant functions, we need to understand a little bit about plant anatomy. So this is like your very short botany lesson for AP Bio, okay? Here's a typical plant. This is a potato plant. No, the bottom's a potato, the top's a tomato. They merged 2 different plants together. It's okay. But my brain only wanted to say one. All right, so we have tomatoes on the top. Plants have 3 parts. They have roots, they have shoots, and they have fruits. There's no such thing as a vegetable. Okay, we have shoots and we have fruits. Now, is tomato a fruit or a vegetable? Good. All right, the only time it's categorized as a vegetable is because the government wanted to tax it. So they could tax fruits and vegetables differently. Vegetables were taxed more. So in the United States, it was categorized as a vegetable, even though it's a fruit. It has seeds. If it has seeds, it's definitely a fruit. All right, so plant structure. We have to obtain raw materials. To do that, we need to obtain sunlight. We have giant solar collectors. Those are our leaves. To collect carbon dioxide, we have what are called stomates, and we're going to have a slide on those in just a second about what a stomate is, but it allows for gas exchange. We have lungs. They have stomates. Water. You guys know where the water comes up, right? Where does it start? Yes, good. Yeah. So water enters the roots and it travels up. Good. Now, other nutrients, again, like our nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, those are also taken in at the roots. So everything it needs that is solid and not gaseous is going to be, well, I guess liquid. Anything that's not gaseous, it's going to take in through its roots. Gas is actually exchanged through the leaves. Now, if we were to take a leaf, so you see this flat leaf here, if we were to cut a little piece out and look at it from the side, the edges, it's going to kind of look like this. Now, what's important is to look at the bottom side of the cell. Remember we talked about transpiration and how water would evaporate out of the bottom of a leaf and drip on you? That's because of these openings. These openings are called stoma. Now here you can see one of these openings. So stoma, stomate, they're pretty much used interchangeably. Just know that the stoma, stomate is, same thing. So here we have a stomate, and these here kind of looks like a mouth around there. That is guard cells. It's two different cells. If I flood this with water, so it has a vacuole in there, and I flood it with water, it's going to make it fill up and get puffy on both sides, and it closes this. Or if I remove the water, I can open it. Okay, so it can open and close, open and close. And this allows for water vapor to escape, but also for carbon dioxide to get in. Okay, carbon dioxide has to get in because we need that for photosynthesis. Now, they make oxygen. Oxygen just also goes out here. So this is kind of another version of it. You can see here, there's these little guard cells, and the stomate is the opening. Here's our little, it's basically just a space or an opening. And this allows all of the oxygen to diffuse out this way. It allows carbon dioxide in, which can diffuse in. Now, it doesn't let only carbon dioxide in, just like our lungs don't let only oxygen in. We breathe it in, we breathe most of it right back out. Same thing happens here. Atmosphere enters here and it is able to pull the carbon dioxide out. Now these are images, the same kind of thing. I'm going to see if I can, hopefully Friday, be able to show you some live images of plants from around campus, around my house that I'll bring in. If you guys were here, you'd be doing it under a microscope. But these, you can see these here are the guard cells. What are these dark spots inside each one of these things? What are the dark spots? Come on, you guys know this. What's the biggest thing inside a cell? Good, yes, that's our nucleus. So you can see the nucleus. This is a cell, it's just weird shaped, and it has its nucleus. Here's another kind of weird shaped cell with a nucleus, more nuclei. This is what it looks like when we look at them. It tends to look more like this than like this. Now you'll notice that under these guard cells, there's less color. That's because that's an opening. That's a big space underneath there. They're three-dimensional. Okay, so now that brings us to our chloroplast. So inside the leaf, we have our cells. Inside those cells, we have chloroplasts. The chloroplasts are shaped like this. They absorb sunlight, okay, and they make energy and sugar. Why do plants look green? Look here. So our chloroplasts are what are causing the green, but why does it look to us green? Why do we see green? As the light comes in, okay, light hits and it's absorbing colors of light except for green. We're going to talk about that more as we go, but chloroplasts are accepting, they're actually allowing and absorbing different colors of light, but not green. They reflect green. Green light is not very helpful. Okay. Our chloroplast, just like we needed to know the mitochondria structure, we need to know the chloroplast structure. He's got messed up. Darn it. Okay. It is a double membrane, just like our mitochondria. We have what's called the stroma. That's the fluid filled inside area. All right. These, okay, each one individually is called a thylakoid. And when we stack them together, we call them a stack of grana or granum. Okay, this is a granum, these are grana. It's dumb. So it kind of looks like poker chips stacked up. Each poker chip would be a thylakoid. Okay, and then the stack is a grana. See how much surface area, how much thylakoid membrane there is there? Why do we want that? Why do we want all that membrane? Look at the cross section of them here. Why do we want all that membrane? We have all this membrane. Look at all that surface area. Why do we want all that? All this membrane gives us way more surface area. More surface area means more reactions. More reactions means more energy. Okay, mo beta. The thylakoid membrane is where we find the actual chlorophyll, which is a pigment. Okay, the chlorophyll is in the chloroplast. We find the electron transport chain and ATP synthase, just like on the inner membrane of our mitochondria. Okay, same kind of thing. We'll look at this in more detail. Don't worry about those pictures. So that brings us to photosynthesis, which is broken down into two parts. We have what are called the light reactions. And this is because it's taking light and doing something with it. They're also called the light dependent reactions because without the light, you can't do the reactions. This is our energy conversion. This right here is taking the energy from the sun, making it into something usable. What we're going to see here is ATP and NADPH. Now, before we had NADH, plants, they stick this P in there. What does P stand for? What's P? This is hydrogen. Phosphorus, yes, they have a phosphorus on there. Okay, but they can still accept the hydrogen. It does the same job. It's just that plants and the phosphorus, plants like peas, I don't know. So ATP and NADPH for plants. After the light reactions, we go through a cycle. Now before, remember we had glycolysis, then we had our link reactions, then we had our Krebs cycle, then electron transport. So here we're going to do electron transport, then our cycle. This one is going to be called the Calvin cycle. Another old white dead dude discovered it. These are light independent. They do not require light. This is where I build sugars. Okay, this is where I'm going to store that energy. All right, so it's going to reduce it into carbon dioxide and sugar. NADPH again is our little savings bank. And It is, when I was in high school, they called these the dark reactions, but that's not an accurate way to describe them. So if you ever see them called the dark reactions, that's not correct. These do not happen in the dark. People thought that light reactions happened during the day and dark reactions happened at night. That's not true. It just means that the Calvin cycle does not need light to do its job. Okay, so these are light independent and these are light dependent. Never ever use dark reactions. Okay, it is not dark reactions. You may still see that in some resources if you're looking at other resources to study. That's why I want to tell you about it. I won't use dark reactions, but you might find them in other resources. So our light reactions. We have an electron transport chain, just like in cellular respiration. There are proteins in the membrane, just like in respiration. There are electron acceptors, just like respiration. This time, instead of NADH, we have NADPH. And we still create a proton gradient across that inner membrane. This time though, we're doing it backwards. So if we look here at our chloroplast, okay, the thylakoid membrane versus the inner membrane. So here's our membranes and membranes. They're the same. Electron transport chain. Now this would actually be 3 different proteins. We know that that's how that works. And ATP synthase. They're the same. Inner membrane. Now ATP synthase is a protein, but it's important to remember synthase ends in ase. That means it's an enzyme, speeding up a reaction. Okay, and now what happens is we have our chloroplast, and the chloroplast has our thylakoid. Okay, so here's a stachygram, and that thylakoid, and we're going to pump in here, and it's going to come back through. So it's like flipped. I know that kind of doesn't make sense. Let me show you. Here's our electron transport chain in a mitochondria. We have the matrix, which is the very inside, and we're pumping hydrogens out into this inner membrane space. Then they go back in to make our ATP. Okay. Here is our thylakoid membrane. And if you look, we're pumping hydrogens in instead of out. And then they go out to create ATP. So it's just like taking respiration in our mitochondria and just flipping it upside down. Okay, so we're just going backwards. And you'll see here, we have a little bit more complicated system, but it's not really, I'm going to show you, it's not that big a deal, I promise. We have 2 different photosystems, photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. We're going to talk about those. We split water so that we can use the hydrogens. And here's our electron. The hydrogens are pumped and moved and do all these different things to give us energy. Okay. ATP synthase, it's the same. Okay. Photosynthesis uses sunlight, respiration breaks down the sugar. They both move electrons to run the pump, to pump the protons, to build the gradient, to drive the flow of protons through ATP synthase, to bond the phosphate to ADP, to generate ATP. Okay, they do the same thing. And it's called the same thing. Okay, so ATP synthase is the same in photosynthesis and respiration. All right, pigments of photosynthesis. Now we didn't have pigments in our mitochondria that we had to worry about because they weren't trapping energy. Pigments are colored molecules. And in this case, we have 2 different ones. We have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. And I talked about having 2 different photosystems. Those 2 photosystems, one uses chlorophyll A, one uses chlorophyll B. And it basically, it is electrons are excited at a different wavelength of energy. So thylakoid membrane, we take a little piece of it and expand it out. Here's a proton. And then there's these little photocollectors. Okay, those are our pigment. That is chlorophyll. Okay. So back to our spectrum of light we talked about at the beginning. We see visible light in a range of 380 nanometers to 750 nanometer wavelengths. Now, if you remember back, for some of you, it may have to be all the way back to like 8th grade when you talked about light. Light acts as both a particle and a wave. It's weird. So these are all the things we can't see. We can't see any of these, but we can see this. All right, now purple, this is our shortest wavelengths. And as we move through the rainbow up to red, these are our longest wavelengths. So we absorb the energy at different wavelengths. Chlorophyll A absorbs best in red and blue, but not in green. Now look at our chart down here. Chlorophyll A, red, blue and red. Okay, not green. It's reflecting green. That's what I see. This is missed a lot on the exam, the class exam and the AP exam. Okay, down here, this is absorbance. It's absorbing these, which means it's reflecting these, absorbing these. Okay. Does anybody know what kind of colored light they use in hot houses and grow labs? I shouldn't tell you guys this. When they bust a house here in Marina Valley for an illegal grow operation, what color lights do they always find inside the house? None of you pay attention to that stuff? Red. It's always red. Red lights. Because they're going to absorb a lot at the red wavelength, but our eyes don't capture a lot of that. Okay, so we use a lot of red lights for growth. They'll also use red lights in greenhouses and things like that. Greenhouse, they use red light. We don't think about those things. You guys are good students and don't know that stuff. I watch TV, I read news, and now you know, so that when you want to grow plants for your house and make it beautiful, not for any other reason, you know you need to use red light. Now we do have some other pigments. These are chlorophyll B, carotenoids, and xanthophylls. What's at the beginning of this word? What color do you think carotenoids are? Yeah, these are orange and yellows, carrots. So carrots are very, very orange because they have lots of carotenoid in it. So our leaves will have these other ones in there. They just don't absorb well. And in the winter, when the spectrum changes, okay, because the planet is tilted and then moving away from the sun and all that, the spectrum of light that's available to plants during the day actually changes. And they don't have nearly as much in the like 5 to 5, in the 450 to 500 range. Okay, so they actually will, the chlorophyll kind of dies out in the leaves. And what's left is the other pigments, the carotenoids and xanthophylls. And these will absorb in the green wavelengths, not as much, but they will do some absorption in there. You'll see it on the yellow line down below, how it's shifted a little bit into the green. Okay, it absorbs some there. Evolutionarily, this allows the plant to be able to continue to collect light and store sugars a little longer in the season. Okay, and this is why plants, the color changes in the fall. Now around here, we pretty much don't have trees that change in the fall. We don't really have fall here. So we don't get to see this firsthand as much, but look it up. It's beautiful. So photosystems. Scientists that came before my time were horrible, evil people. We have two different photosystems, and they act like a set of solar panels. So if you've ever seen a house with solar panels, they don't have like one panel. They have a bunch of them that all collect. And that's kind of what's happening here. So the photons hit, and we kind of bounce that energy around to our electron transfer. Okay. Our first photosystem that is triggered is called photosystem 2. The first photosystem triggered is called photosystem 2. It uses chlorophyll A at a wavelength of 680 nanometers. Important information there. So the first photosystem is photosystem 2 with chlorophyll A at 680 nanometer wavelength. That's red light. Okay, it's triggered by red light. And it's photosystem 2 because they didn't figure this one out until after they figured the other one out. Photosystem 1 is chlorophyll B, absorbs at 700 nanometers, which is also a red light. Our plants really do absorb the most with red, okay? And then quite a bit into the blue just to get that extra boost. Now this one's photosystem 1, or I'm sorry, photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. They discovered photosystem 1 first, and then they found photosystem 2. Then they figured out about chlorophyll and the wavelengths. It's horrible, but you got to remember photosystem 2 comes before photosystem 1. Okay, so these antenna pigments, basically these are just pigments that send the energy over to one processing center. Now these are on the protein, okay? And just like before, we have that electron that's excited. Water is split. It causes an electron to be kicked out, or I'm sorry, a proton to be kicked out. The electron travels on and kicks another proton out. Okay, then it can continue. And then after here, what happens is instead of kicking out hydrogens, it makes our NADPH. Okay, so we make some hydrogens and some NADPH. Those hydrogens are produced inside the thylakoid space. They go through the ATP synthase, meaning we have our ATP out here in the stroma. Okay, stroma. So sunlight hits photosystem 2 at 680 nanometers, exciting electrons. Boy, there we go. And water is split. We have our oxygen. We have our hydrogens. The hydrogens are used to help move those electrons. Oxygen is breathed out, okay, by our plant. And we have hydrogens that are exit the photosystem, okay, and some that have the electron carry it back. So here's our chloroplast, here's our grana, here's a thylakoid, here's our ATP synthase. We've pumped all these hydrogens in here through other proteins, and now they're going to come back through, giving us ATP. Okay, now we have photosystem 1. Those ATP are produced here, but we're not done. We're going to also use photosystem 1 at 700 nanometers, chlorophyll B, to excite more. And these are going to make our NADPHs. Now we're going to use this energy from the first photosystem to take the extra energy from our ADPH and be able to convert that into stored energy. Okay. I know it looks crazy. Trust me, Friday we're going to draw it. It'll be much easier to understand. So electron transport chain of photosynthesis uses light energy to produce ATP and NADPH. Those both go to the Calvin cycle. Photosystem 2 absorbs light. Excited electrons pass from chlorophyll to the primary electron acceptor. You need to replace the electron in chlorophyll. The enzyme extracts the electrons from water and supplies them to the chlorophyll. It splits the water to do that, putting a couple of oxygens together and releasing them from the system. And this is what it looks like. Now, they wanted to find out, how do I know that this is what happens? So they put a radioactive tracer on the oxygen found in water. Okay, they then let it undergo the process, and they found that sugars were produced, and the sugar did not have any radioactive tracing on it, but the oxygen in the system did. So we know that water is split using the hydrogens to take the electron and then creating oxygen gas. In a separate experiment, they tagged only the carbon dioxide oxygens and allowed it to go through the system. And they found tagging on the sugars that were produced, but not on the oxygen. So we know that the CO2 is converted directly to those sugars. Okay, so we're able to actually track those oxygens. Plants have to split water. If plants do not have water, they cannot do photosynthesis. Okay, we have to have oxygen, they have to have water, they have to have carbon dioxide. We're not going to worry about this because it just makes things confusing. Yep. Don't worry about it. It's really not important. We already talked about it. Yeah. So photosystem 2 excites it. We get an ATP. Photosystem 1 excites it. We get NADPH. So we get some energy and we get some savings. This is all going to make much more sense on Friday. Okay, where did the energy come from that went into that formula? Where's the energy come from? The ultimate source of energy for our planet is? There we go. Okay, sunlight. So the sun is the source of our energy. Where do the electrons in the system come from? Okay, we excite electrons, but as we do that, we have to replenish those electrons, and we get that from splitting something. Good, Tim. Fiona, excellent. We split water, okay? When we split water, those hydrogens, remember hydrogen is a proton and an electron. By splitting that, we can then take that hydrogen, move the electron into the photosystem, and move the hydrogen through the pump. Where did the water come from? How did I get water into those cells? Yes. Good, Javier. Fiona. Excellent. So it comes up from the roots. There's oxygen in this system. Where did the oxygen come from? We talked about it once already, up here. Where do we get that oxygen? Good, Angela. Excellent. Good. Okay, so when we split water, remember, we split the water to get the hydrogens and the electrons, and as a result, we wind up with oxygen that we get rid of. Okay. So oxygen, where'd it go? Yep, good. Out of the system to the atmosphere, it's released. Excellent. Hydrogen, where'd the hydrogen come from? Yep, leftovers from our water. Good. Where'd the ATP come from? What is the process that gives us ATP? Okay, may have to look at that a little bit. ATP comes from chemiosmosis, which is, remember, we have the electron transport chain, and then we have our ATP synthase. So ATP happens in both photosynthesis and respiration, and it's through the electron transport chain and chemiosmosis. What are we going to use that ATP for? Why do cells need ATP? Yep, all the cell processes, everything the cell needs. We're also going to use some of that ATP to basically make our sugar to store our energy. Where did the NADPH come from? I'll give you a hint. It's one of the photosystems. Photosystem. Yes, photosystem 1. Good. What is it going to be used for? Okay, that question popped up and I seriously saw several of you make this like weird face, like, I don't know. It's going to be moved to the Calvin cycle for us to be able to store sugar, make sugar and store that energy. Excellent. Okay, Calvin cycle is on Friday. We're going to review this. We'll draw it. It's so much easier than respiration when we actually draw it. Trust me. If you can do respiration, this is a breeze. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, it feels very, very chaotic, but once we draw it, you'll see it's like super easy. It's not nearly as complicated as this looks. That's why I like drawing all this out. Now, if anybody has ever like